All right, let's do it. Uh, Hi, everybody. I am Brandon Kessler. I am founder and CEO of DevPost. We power the majority of hackathons that happen around the globe, both public ones and private ones. And really excited to have our esteemed panelists today. First, just talk a little bit about the agenda. First, we'll do some welcome and introductions. Then we'll do the live discussion. And then Q&A from audience. We've already had some really good questions that have come in, and you can absolutely use the Q&A function to submit additional questions. And the recording will be shared after the event. Let's move on to our next slide here. Great. Well, so I'd like to welcome our panelists again. We have Chris Aiden, who is VP of Innovation and Emerging Technologies at Estée Lauder. We have Netta Retter, who's Director of Innovation Programs at Okta, and we have Nico Weiss, who is a Solutions Advisor at SAP. I'd love to just throw it to each of you, please, starting with Chris. If you could please just give us a little background about what you do and approximately how many hackathons you've been a part of in your career.
Sure, thank you. So I lead innovation, emerging, and inclusive technology for Estée Lauder companies. For me, I've led and been part of dozens of hackathons over the last couple of decades. And I think when I think about my role, hackathons have become a big part of the culture here at Estée Lauder companies, as well as at my past companies, because of what it brings, the dynamic that it creates, and all of the benefits that we get from it. So what I do is very entwined with that, because my team is always trying to come up with something new. We're always trying to figure out new ways to delight our employees, to figure out ways to delight our consumers. And so for me, hackathons are very much part of my work identity and what I do and what I enjoy doing.
Fantastic. Netta, love to hear from you about your background, a little bit around hackathons and how many you've been a part of as well.
Absolutely. Really excited to be here. So my background is actually in hardware engineering. I was a hardware engineer for over 10 years. And funny enough, the first hackathon that I was ever a part of was at Meta, where I was hired to lead their hack culture and hackathons globally. So I started that role and was at my first hackathon. And since then, I've also been a part of dozens of hackathons. I'm extremely passionate about them. And another interesting one is Brandon and I met as part of the Build for COVID-19 hackathon, which ended up being the world's second largest hackathon. So I've been a part of them internally at companies and externally, and I think they're such an incredible opportunity for innovation. So excited to jump in and talk more about them.
Thanks, Netta. And Nico, I'm really excited you've joined this panel because you work on a different kind of hackathon, a customer hackathon. So I'd love to hear, a little bit about you and anything you want to share about how many of those you've had.
Well, thank you for having us tonight or this afternoon. My name is Nico Wies, and yes, we do have a little bit of a different background, and happy to talk about that and also hear the other perspectives from the other panelists today. I'm a solution advisor when it comes to topics like automation, extension, stuff like this. But I also do have the happy job of organizing VR events or hackathons, and hackathon is specifically for our customers. Yeah, looking forward to discussion today.
Fantastic. So let's get right into it. A lot of people think about hackathons. Well, maybe they first heard about them because college hackathons. People don't sleep for a weekend, and we love those. We power the majority of those. And then some people start to realize as they, have jobs, et cetera, that hackathons are happening within their company. But there are still questions that we hear, which is how does one justify a hackathon? So I'd love to just go to each of you, starting with Chris, if you wouldn't mind, which is why does your company run hackathons? What is the business justification?
Well, I think if I boil it all the way down, it's an opportunity for people to not only come up with new and fresh ideas, but to collaborate on those ideas and to be put into that situation of thinking differently from their day-to-day grind. And it always creates these unique situations because everyone has their body of knowledge. They know what they know, but when you start crossing the different organizational lines, you start to realize that there's a lot more commonality and a lot more opportunity when ideas come together. And so I think it, at its base level, that's really what it is.
Thank you. How about you, Netta?
So I think something pretty incredible about hackathons that Facebook realized really early on is that there are so many different business values. It's this opportunity to unleash creativity, have a lot of fun. I think that you see folks learn new skills. They collaborate and make connections with different people who they may not typically work with. They learn role empathy. We've seen people transition and take on brand new roles. So there's a lot of business values in a lot of ways, in addition to the fact that some of these ideas actually end up on the roadmap and shipping. So it's this opportunity to really democratize what you build, how you build it, and make sure that even as a company scales, people have the opportunity to have a voice.
Fantastic. Nico?
Well, so much was said already because unleash creativity, having connections, and I think these are one of the most important points that we can bring up because maybe going 2 steps back, what we do, we have customers in our hackathon, and if we can create these immense connectivities and unleash the creativity with our customers, this is what we're trying to achieve and take them out of their business day and let them develop something unique. And I think this gives us the possibility really to create something new. Yeah.
So just to throw it back to you, Nico, I want to make sure everyone's clear on what a customer hackathon is.
Sure.
So if I have it right, you work closely with the sales organization. You have either existing customers or prospective customers, if I understand correctly, and you want them to actually build as opposed to just watch a sales deck or a demo. If I'm hearing you correctly, you want them to
Yes.
get their hands dirty. Is that true? And if so, could you share a little more about that?
Really, really well said. Yes, exactly. This is exactly what we do. So we have an SAP, and maybe I have to say SAP is a process-driven software enterprise which sells out of the box final solutions, right? But sometimes there might be a situation that arises where you do not have like the specification or the specific extension on this product that you need. And sometimes the solution is, or this problem is too small that you might tackle it within your daily work, or not big enough that it will land on the roadmap. So what do you do? And this is exactly like the spot where you can find the time and the expertise with our experts at the hackathon and develop this specific solution then.
Got it. And I'll just add from what we see across our customers, like how they justify it, how this fits with their business goals. Generally, we see 2 primary goals: innovation, and we'll talk about how that's essentially AI these days, and collaboration, which is coming together, working with people you haven't worked with, enjoying your job more, wanting to stay at your job more, et cetera. But those 2 things together, and the reason hackathons, everything that has been said from the panelists, and in addition, and perhaps reinforcing it, they have deadlines and a schedule, which creates a sense of urgency and allows you to time box, hey, we want to experiment with XYZ AI. So let's get it done in this period of time, as opposed to just letting it sit there, forever. There's learning through building. Nothing like getting your hands dirty, as all the panelists are saying. There are competitive instincts, but it's like, running a marathon. You're not going to win the New York City Marathon, most likely, but you're setting a goal and accomplishing it. And there's something about that that gets people jazzed, excited. And then prizes, which we'll talk about a little bit more, which are a good incentive. And ideally, when they're aligned well with the business, they really make hackathons strategic and something that you can justify in your business. Great. So actually, one last question on that, or if you feel like you've already covered it, that's fine too, which is we understand sort of why your business does it, but any specific connection that you can share between what's great about hackathons and why specifically your companies of, say, Estée, SAP, although you've covered that, I believe, Nico, and Okta are using them? Any business goals you feel comfortable sharing or connections making between the value of hackathons and your specific business?
So I can start if you'd like. I think it's this sense of discovery. You know, you know what you know, but there's this sea of information that you don't know. And when you start bringing all of these people together, by the way, I love that term, role empathy. I think that's great. But when you start bringing all these people together, they start to identify and bubble things to the surface that maybe it's not even really part of the topic of the current hackathon, but it can be a thread that you start pulling for the next hackathon. But regardless of that, you start to learn more about what's happening in the organization, what is challenging the organization. You know, we're all at big companies, all the panelists are at big companies, and you know, it's easy to not necessarily know what's going on in another part of the business that is creating a lot of challenges for a particular team or a group of individuals. And a hackathon is just a way to, you know, I guess it's one of those like happy benefits of a hackathon.
And I think it's this opportunity, which Chris touched on as well, to leverage all these unique perspectives. So people outside of their core work have all this lived experience, and it's an opportunity to bring the people who are using the products as close as possible to the people who are building the products, and also to align that with the things that they're most passionate about. So, you know, for Okta, for example, it might be that you get to work on a space that maybe you don't work on in your core work, and you learn more about it and you bring a different perspective to it and make it more secure, make it better. And so I think that's part of it, is that alignment between the passion, the lived experience, like telling people about different aspects that you may not have otherwise thought of, to Chris's point about things that maybe weren't already on the roadmap. And then I think the other thing is, you really want to make sure that the most innovative people want to work for your company. Because in my opinion, you have two choices. Either they have these opportunities to unleash that innovation here, or they're going to do it nights and weekends and probably for someone else, or maybe they'll leave. So how do you make sure that you create the space for them to harness that energy within your company?
Love that. And Nico, I believe you've addressed this a little bit with why SAP is doing that. So I'm going to move on to AI.
That's fine.
Okay. In our experience, what we're hearing, innovation these days is synonymous with AI. We are certainly seeing it everywhere with hackathons. Of the 1,200 that we powered last year, perhaps just a handful did not have an AI component. I've never seen anything like that anywhere, but I want to hear from you. What are you witnessing at your organization with regard to AI? Has leadership bought in? What do you feel comfortable sharing about that? And let's start with Nico.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, yes, of course. As leadership bought in, we are a software company. How can we not speak in every second call about AI? It's also with our customers, the demand is really high and the interest is really high about the whole topic. And it might not have been really, I would say, relevant to the customer, but it was there before. So we are, as said, process-driven company. So when it comes to, for example, from a hire to retire process, so many machine learning models were already there, but now we're talking really intensively more about what can be there or done with generative AI and stuff. And when to your second part of the question, has the leadership bought in? Absolutely, yes. So that's also why we, for example, renamed our hackathons to Business Meets AI. So we really want to have the business focus, but still with also a focus on the AI part.
Great. Chris, I'd love to hear from you at Estée Lauder. I think people might ask, well, okay, let's talk to us about Estée Lauder and AI.
So first off, yeah, absolutely. Our executive leadership team is all on board with AI. You know, it's basically a superpower, right? It allows each of us to do more, to have more clarity. For me, this is a sea change. It's kind of like when the iPhone came out. Every other phone just was unimportant at that point because I had the internet in my pocket. I had a usable interface, and same with the actual internet, and I look at AI a lot like the internet was in the mid 90s, where, working in IT, a conversation with our leadership was all around, well, do we give people access to it? Will it be abused? How do we make it secure? And it's kind of bizarre how much the conversation is identical to a conversation nearly 30 years ago. But it is that big of a sea change. And I think where, there's always caution with that, right? There's concerns around security. We would never put anyone's, we don't use real data when we're testing things. All of these kind of guardrails we're building and putting in place to really make this something that becomes part of people's daily lives, because we believe it's going to make everyone way more productive.
And if I may just ask a follow-up on that, what are some specific things, if you feel comfortable sharing, that Estée Lauder was, looking to improve or address, or would allow participants in their hackathons? Is it just the engineers? Is it just about your website, or is it about processes, data, and other things?
Well, I think it's about everything, right? It's opportunities to look. The more time we can free up from an individual for the repetitive tasks that they have to do, the more time we're going to give them to think about what's next, to enable the future that we want to build, to create the technologies that delight our consumers, that delight our employees, that build the community and the culture that we want to build. And AI is just this amazing thing that I can't even imagine my daily life anymore without it. So, it's, for me, okay, how do we quickly make this something that I can get into everyone's hands as quickly and securely and as responsibly as possible?
And before throwing it to Netta, I'll just add that we've been doing AI competitions for about a decade, but those were with, large sets of data trying to optimize one specific thing for the most part. And I think much of what we're talking about today is, of course, this transformation with generative AI, where you have this artificial brain assisting all of us in ways that even its creators don't know how or why it's working that way. So yeah, to Netta, would love to hear from you.
Sure. So last year in May, we hosted an internal hackathon, and it just happened that ChatGPT came out just before that. And it was something that I think a lot of companies were debating. Do we use this? Do we not use this? Do we enable? And there were a lot of very embarrassing things that happened where a lot of data or source code was accidentally leaked. I think people were generally nervous. Our legal team was looking at it and trying to think about how or when they might open this up. It also was a little bit unclear, it wasn't the same discussion we're having today. And we were able to be the first people to bring it into the company by creating these guardrails, which I think you can only do at hackathons, because you only have to show a glimmer of truth. You only have to show some value, some proof of concept around a thing. You don't actually have to build it out. You don't have to get full buy-in for production. You can say, we'll deal with all these details later. Let's just put together some guardrails. So we brought it in and we opened it up to the entire company. And we were able to also have very low cost, because you only need access. You only want people to have access for a month. We literally said, you have 1 month to use this. For the hackathon afterwards, we're going to scrub it. You can only use synthetic data. You can only use publicly available information, but you can show us the proof of what should we build? How should we build it? And then also, what would be the cost? What would you do if you had more time? And then you're having a real discussion, because I think if you just have an idea, it's really hard to nail down, what does that mean? To me and to you, it's two different things. And here you can actually dig into the details by showing it with some other information, but you can very clearly translate what that might mean for you. And as a result, we have this big conference for Okta called Octane. Several of the AI products that were shown on stage actually came from that hackathon, and several things that have shipped from Okta actually came from that hackathon. And so now we have this other discussion where okay, we've all bought into generative AI, right? But there are still new tools coming out all the time. And this is a really easy place to also experiment very, very quickly by saying, okay, we'll give folks very short access in a little sandbox environment, and then we can decide which tools do we want to buy into later. Because to buy enterprise licenses to these tools is expensive, it's risky. Whereas if you're just using it with fake data, you can create the value. So you can still continue to look at it in a very innovative way at like whatever the emerging technology is by leveraging hackathons.
Awesome. I want to ask you all about team building. This idea of finding partners to work with you. Perhaps you might decide that's not important and you just want to work with the existing teammates one works with, or you might say, no, actually, we want to encourage people to team up with those they haven't worked with before. Nico, I know yours was a customer hackathon. How did teams work?
So teams, they apply with a use case, so they come with the customer predefined. But what we are looking now for the next upcoming hackathon in June, that they can exchange more, and we might leverage the function of DevPost there to find teammates that they can exchange. Yeah.
Thanks. And just to give a little background on that, DevPost for Teams, our private hackathon product, does have a team building feature which people can decide to use if they like, where they can share their idea and others can team up with them, or you can decide no, teams are preformed at the beginning. Chris, I'd love to hear from you on team building.
Sure. So we try to be really or I guess we're not overly prescriptive when it comes to building teams. We try to make it as easy as possible, but really our only rule is that it has a max of 4 people, 5 people, and that's just from experience that larger teams tend to there's a diminishing return on that. But I will plug your product a little bit. I love the new Teams aspect of your of your product. It makes that process a little easier because, quite frankly, it's better when teams have more diversity in their backgrounds. And at work, we tend to surround ourselves with people that we're working with day in and day out, and they likely know the things that we know, or we worked on similar things, and that diversity of thought just doesn't necessarily bubble up. And so I like when there's a team connection process that builds that out. But we tend to have our hackathons as internal and external as well, and we just have different prize mechanisms for employees versus external participants. Well, it really depends on if we're trying to solve an internal business problem, that's all internal. But if we're trying to solve a social problem or work on something like new ideas around breast cancer research, we will do a dual path on that.
Got it. And most people probably know, but Estée Lauder has been a leader in the field of breast cancer research for many, many decades. And then Netta, before throwing it to you, I'll just add one team building tip one might consider, which is if it is important, either for the business goal or for the hackathon goal, one can also add it as a judging criteria. So on DevPost for Teams, you have judging criteria, and you could say, could be like, did they work with people they haven't worked with before? You could ask that question, and then that could actually encourage it as a structure of the hackathon as well. Netta, love to hear from you in team building, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was something that I learned actually at Meta. They have not a lot of requirements. So teams can be any size, you can hack on anything. And teams that do really well, they are able to go and present their idea to, it used to be to Mark and to different kind of executives across the company. And the incredible thing when you look back on the data from their very first hackathon is diverse teams with different roles tend to get there better. Because in the same way that we build these diverse teams to build products, because all these skill sets put together can better kind of tell the story of impact and why this thing is important. And so something that we do at Okta that we've really been able to leverage DevPost for Teams around is encouraging folks in a remote first environment to find teams. So we don't limit team size or topic, but you go out there and you galvanize people around your idea. And honestly, that can be the first barrier. Like if you can't convince other people to work on your idea, maybe the timing is just not right. Go work on an idea that they have this time, and then maybe they'll join you next time. We also love that you can mark your team as open or closed. So it creates this like very open environment where if a team is open, you should just join them. You don't have to ask permission. This space is for you. And I think that people, you know, I've had people say to me, well, I don't want to be dead weight. You know, I can only do a presentation. I'm like, you're going to be amazing. You're going to add so much to this team. Go and join. And people love it. And they make these new connections. So I think a lot of companies struggle, especially remotely, to make these connections. And that is a huge opportunity. So you're able to search, you're able to say, my team is looking for these specific skill sets. You're able to add in your skill sets. You actually end up with like a hacker profile where you can look up people in the system and see what are their skills, what projects have they worked on in the past. So you can go out and recruit them. So we leverage the team building aspect all the time. And it's actually been like extremely seamless, very easy for people. And by not saying a minimum or a maximum team size, it creates a lot of freedom for folks who participate as well.
I love that. And I'll say one thing we do and sometimes encourage, it really depends. And you can change it with the next hackathon or the one after, is when you don't have that limit where someone could have one person on their team or multiple, you'll actually sometimes see people with multiple projects. They're just going to like work on that one single thing they've been wanting to do. Okay, maybe they won't spend the entire time on it, but they want to get that out there. They want to make sure people see that idea. And then they might join a team sometimes too. Really depends on whom they are. Great. So these are fantastic tips. We talked a little bit about data security, but you can't talk about Gen AI without talking about risks. And this is not just about whether World War III is potentially going to be started. We're hopefully never will get there, but data security and privacy. And what we see from pretty much every customer is, okay, we see the power of Gen AI, but we have risks, and how are we mitigating them? So I know there's been some talk of this in previous answers, but let's just make sure that everyone talks about it. First of all, how do you protect customer data, or is there anything else that you recommend with regard to data and safety with your AI hackathons? Netta, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is very, very critical. So we have a very clear policy that says that you should only use synthetic data. So absolutely no customer data at all, period, in a hackathon, and only publicly available information. So a lot of people want to create these different chatbots that might make your job easier by searching through all these, you know, documents that are internal to the company and popping out a response. You can prove the value of that by using publicly available information, saying we would teach the model in the same way, but doing this. Because I think anytime you want to use kind of source code, internal data, anything like that, you need to go through an entire security review and think about how you might do that and where the LLM is sitting and all these other things. So for a hackathon, so you can experiment quickly and easily, synthetic data, publicly available information, period. And then oh, sorry, Brandon. And the last thing, sorry, is we also scrub. So afterwards, you delete all of the things that folks have created. You give them the opportunity to download the source code, and then they can delete it.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Chris.
Yeah, I think she had the perfect answer, right? It is that, right? It's not ever allowing any sensitive data into the hackathon. There's just not, there's no value in it. And to her point, to Neto's point, we can certainly mimic the data and create the data, the fake data that we need to prove a point. So, and even, you know, using AI beyond hackathons, that's, I think, a good suggestion for where we're currently at is, you know, no sensitive data in the AI until, you know, there's some maturity around the security of the systems.
And Nico, how did you deal with it?
For us, I would say it's a little bit different because our main goal when our customers develop an MVP during that hackathon, we want them to transition that MVP to production environment, productive environment. And normally they bring their own landscape and we just give them additional resources, for example, in the generative AI or the machine learning parts. And there they can leverage enterprise grade software. So we have the contracts all done where it states that no data will be used for the retraining. And also if we work together, for example, with leaders like Microsoft or Google, and they provide their models to our landscapes, it's the same thing. So pretty clear for our customers that they can leverage their real data.
I will just add that one can use data that is not customer data as part of a hackathon. So let's just say that the goal is to improve an internal process. We do know that some employees do have access to whether it's ChatGPT or their version through Microsoft, or perhaps through Vertex AI with Google Workspace and others, that they do potentially have access, not so much to customer data, but to processes. And the one question that employees can ask themselves is like, how can I get rid of a process that I have, been wasting an hour or two on? I know Chris talked about repetitive tasks earlier. You don't necessarily need customer data to try and address through AI a process. So there is that option to add as potentially a category in your hackathon, which is internal processes, and a warning, no customer data should be used in any of these projects, et cetera. Of course, that'll be monitored, but there is that element. It doesn't all have to be customer data. So let's move on to hackathon success tips. This has been great, and this can be with regard to AI hackathons, it's in regard to non-AI hackathons, but let's keep that in mind. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've had with planning a hackathon, and how have you overcome them? Netta, let's start with you, then Chris, then Nico.
Yeah, I think it can be really challenging to create the energy and excitement, especially with competing priorities, right? There is like the core business work that needs to go on. So I think getting the buy-in really, really early, trying to find dates that work. So I'll talk to different teams all across the company and say, okay, here's what we're targeting. But doing that very, very early, putting it out there like 6 months in advance. I think one of the biggest challenges, honestly, is that hackathons are not only for engineers. And often when you talk to people in other roles, they just don't feel like it's a space for them. And so being really clear on what is the value for you if you do choose to hack, what's the value to the company, and what value will you bring to the team? Really kind of getting very clear and lowering that barrier to entry. So translating what's the business value to leaders so that they block the time, and then what's the value to the people who want to participate. And the last one is, I think that if you don't take it seriously, the things that people build, and you treat it in the same way you might treat like an intramural basketball team at lunch, people see that and they'll stop investing, they'll stop coming and building really amazing things. So you have to make sure that there is a path forward, or at least a way to get feedback for some of those top ideas, so that it's real and it's impactful.
Okay, I feel like your answer was so good that it really deserves us circulating that to the rest of the people here. We hear that constantly, and we also got at least a couple questions about that same thing in advance of this. So let's just go around, and I'm going to start with you, Netta, actually. How do you get engagement, and how do you connect that to any kind of post-hackathon and then what for these projects?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just wrapped up a hackathon last week, and we had over 10%, maybe like 12% of the company participate, which is just incredible, in my opinion. And again, they're never required. Everyone can feel free to participate if they'd like to participate. But I think we try to tie it back to like, it's fun, it's engaging, there are different elements. We send a message to thank people that goes to their manager and talks about their specific project often. We give them feedback about the actual projects. There's an entire pathway for legal review for patentable projects. There are projects that influence the roadmap, and then you come back and you kind of amplify those stories and those examples. So I think it's like very multi-layered, but I would say just being very strategic and intentional about each element that you do, and making sure that it doesn't take away from. So if your goal is to make it inclusive, don't only post about it in hackathon channels. Don't always talk about what did you code if you want people who don't code. And that's like one simple example, but I think there are a lot of those that you do unintentionally, often when you're kind of creating these spaces.
Chris, love to hear from you.
So I think she pretty much covered the waterfront with a lot of perfect answers. I think the only things I can add to that are really around the challenge. Speaking to people's hearts is super important, right? That's kind of the call to action that gets people interested. And then the community aspect of, I think a lot of first-time hackathon participants just are so intimidated that because they may not know how to use a certain technology, they may view their skill sets as somewhat limited. So but everyone that is passionate about it always ends up really contributing and loving it, and then participating in hackathon after hackathon after hackathon. It becomes something that may even inspire them to switch careers. It develops new friendships. And once you kind of have that velocity, that momentum, then your next hackathon is easier to get executive sponsorship. It's easier to get leaders in the company to be judges, to agree to things like having dinner with or a lunch with the winners, and getting investment to follow through and bring those ideas to fruition. And so, as you build that momentum, as people start to get more and more excited, then I think you can have deeper and deeper challenges. You can stage things differently. You get invited to ideate with other groups. Just a lot of really wonderful things start to happen in the organization.
Absolutely. We see it time and again. Nico, how have you gotten engagement, or anything you want to add around this, please?
Yeah, I think as Neda mentioned, this really early buy-in is really important. But from our side, it's the buy-in not of our participants, it's the buy-in from their leadership, right? So we had just to prove that we actually can develop something, and that they also believe that this what's going to be developed will also be brought to production and will actually help them further on after the hackathon. So I think this was our biggest challenge.
Great. And I'm going to add some stuff here because I spend a lot of my time on this, and my team would probably say I'm a fairly broken record when it comes to this. This is so important. Getting buy-in from the beginning, finding those advocates, generally ahead of engineering, is going to get it. Generally, not always, but generally. And so one is getting them from the beginning. But the second is aligning the goals with the business. So saving money, saving time, delighting customers, these kinds of things are, really common. You don't have to choose those, but it's certainly worth thinking about it. And it's certainly, in my experience, going to allow executives to say, awesome. Like, they're taking this goal, and instead of just going with the roadmap, giving everybody a chance to make something cool and to learn in the process. So aligning the categories and the structure with business goals, perhaps your own KPIs or OKRs or whatever system that you use. These are really, really great techniques. And then bringing them in as judges, allowing them to view the projects, and then allowing them to be mentors, to give advice when you're thinking about it and you need a business stakeholder. And then the prizes. This is really cool. Aligning those prizes with your culture and getting visibility within the organization, so that people are like, oh, cool. You can't promise that the winner is going to be made. I mean, you can, but it's generally not done. But you can certainly promise that there'll be a review from stakeholders to determine whether it is practical and whether they want to review it. So actually, I'd love to hear from any of you, any prizes that you think have been cool and why. Throw it to you, Chris, first.
So, well, I think I'll start with maybe a cautionary. Our first couple of hackathons that we did were international hackathons, and we had prizes that became very difficult to ship. Things like drones, which may be legal in the US, but not legal in other places. So we kind of veered away from those kind of prizes pretty quickly because, it's a little disheartening to win and then something is stuck in customs for 8 months. Those things are challenging. So we tend to do prizes that are a little easier to deliver internationally these days. And also just being aware that, there's different tax rules around the world, and a prize may not be as good as you were thinking it is if there's a big, VAT associated with it or something like that. But I think prizes can be something material. It can be a cash prize, it can be a gift certificate, it can be, a robotic arm, it can be a lot of different things. But I think what we see a lot is, especially with the internal hackathons, a lunch with a C-suite executive, a celebration for their idea, and messages that go beyond their participants all have something that is a little more meaningful. I mean, we all like the cash prizes and things like that, but I think the things that transcend the cash are really what people end up appreciating more.
Anything to add?
I definitely agree with that glory aspect and like pride. So it's interesting. Brandon and I have had many discussions about this, but at Meta, they don't actually have winners for hackathons. And one of the people who was involved very early said, we don't have winners because if you have winners, the implication is you also have losers. And so they feel very strongly about that. And it's more about what did you build? Did it ship? Where did it go? Did you fail? Great. What did you learn? So kind of leveraging all these other aspects. And the biggest thing actually was the feedback and the follow-up. So by having someone follow up on the product, get feedback, and it can be, we're not building this, but here's why. Someone looked at it. That I think did a lot. I think at Okta, we do have winners. And we did, to Chris's point, instead of shipping, we leveraged an internal system. So we have this Okta Appreciate, which is one of those kind of appreciation things, and you can give people money that they can then use anywhere. And so we leveraged an existing system, got out of a lot of the international. Shipping international is really, really challenging. So that was something that we did that made it really, really simple and straightforward. But I think it really is about the glory. And the nice thing, again, about DevPost is you can actually see in your hacker profile if you've won a past hackathon, and people love that.
Yeah, it just can. Oh, did you finish? Sorry. Yeah, just to add up on this about this feedback, that's because we see the value in this feedback after like 3 months, 4 months, and therefore we try to organize with the winners an event, go to a concert, and really also just see how it's working and if they implemented it. Of course, we also do it like more formally, but you get so much more information if you take them out, for example, to a nice okay game or so. And also about being emotionally invested, what you said, and the cash prize, of course, they love to go to these events, but then we've always been asked, like, can I get a badge? Can I get a credit badge or so? So they really want to be announced as the winners of the SAP Hackathon. Yeah.
Fantastic. I will just add that we have a judging platform and we're continually improving it, and it does allow you to submit feedback as well to the participants. Great. So we have several questions, some of which have already been addressed. So I'm just going to look through them here and then we'll ask them to the team. There is a question at the beginning. So pre-hackathon, is it better to focus on a specific issue to solve with AI, for example, forecasting, or keep it open? Anybody want to speak to their view on this?
I have one. So I typically like being able to open it up and say you can hack on anything, but then also giving folks context. So that way they have the option. You can choose. So either you're going to hack on anything you'd like, or by the way, here's some context on a problem that we're going to solve in the 3 to 5 year timeline. Because if you give them a problem you want to solve 6 months from now, starting from a hackathon, that's really probably not enough ramp up time, but something that's in the future. Here's some internal here's an inside view on the problem we're facing, but it has to be not a sprint. So you're not telling them how to solve it, but you're giving them a lot of information on the problem and the challenge so they have enough context to give you different approaches. And it can only work if it's a problem that you are very open to different types of solutions. So if you already know how you want to solve it and you want to just turn it into like a scoped out project, probably not a good fit. But if you're like, here's a problem I don't really know how to address, it's really cool to see how people approach it.
Anything else to add, either Chris or Nico?
I mean, I have a tendency to want to have a specific, very broad challenge, but within, a certain genre of a topic. I want it to be something that I can say, okay, let's figure out how to make the world more accessible. And then, that's a hackathon we did a few years ago. And then the year after that, we narrowed the focus to, okay, let's now talk about making beauty more accessible. And then again, we shift gears to other problems because, in the first hackathon, it was a very broad challenge and we had all of these amazing submissions. And so we were curious, okay, well, what does the world think about accessible beauty and in ways that we're maybe not thinking about it? And so we narrowed that focus the following year and got all of these amazing submissions, and it was really exciting. But as you're judging and you're going through these things, when it's a really broad topic that could be over all kinds of other things, judging is very difficult. And I'll plug your product again. The thing that I used to dread around hackathons was actually all of the logistics, the judging, the organization, and your platform has just done such an amazing job in simplifying that it's hard to imagine doing a hackathon without that tool, that capability, because now that you've used it, it's just so, it's intuitive, and it makes everything so much faster, so much more streamlined, that's no longer the dread part. Now the other things of finding the funding and agreeing on the topic and stuff, which can be exciting also, but it's certainly a challenge.
Well, that's very kind of you. Great to hear. Thank you. Anything to add?
I mean, for us, maybe the question doesn't really apply since we focus on the technology stack, right? For the SAP software, the SAP AI tools. Besides that, we really leave it open to the customer, like if he wants to invent or if he wants to automate, right?
Great. I'll just add, in our experience, there is no one right answer. One can keep it very open-ended. One can be very specific with problem statements. This often happens in regions like APAC region, where it's problem statements. Maybe you vote on specific ones and then everyone works on that. That's totally cool. I will just one thing about DevPost for Teams. We have one-click templates where you can launch a hackathon. They do not have to be all hands hackathons. You could have smaller ones. You could have your engineering team work on something. You could have your design team work on a design sprint hackathon. You could have one specific problem be addressed, run as many hackathons as you like that have business value, and that's part of that. I think what we're going to do is wrap it up now. I've looked through the questions. We've pretty much covered the majority of them, and I just want to say thank you so much for your time, and thank you to all the participants. If you have any questions at all, you can certainly write us at info@devpost.com. And if you have any questions for anyone specific, certainly we can forward it on to them. We can contact them directly. Thank you so much to the panelists, to Nico, Chris, and Netta. Really appreciate your time. And thanks to the audience too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
We will have a recording of this and that will be published. So definitely stay tuned on our LinkedIn, and it's probably have something messaged to you if they offer that as well. Thanks a lot.